I was present at the creation of RMI back in 1981, and to watch the organization grow was really quite remarkable. It's become a national treasure in so many ways, providing data, information, perspective, so many studies and so forth. It's hard to think of anything that is comparable in the nonprofit world. And not the least of what they've done is to hire great young people out of great institutions and give them a platform and start in life. So welcome, please, the next panel with two great young rising stars at Rocky Mountain Institute.
Great, thank you, David. I'd like to welcome my colleagues from RMI in the spirit of our growing and emerging strategic collaboration and partnership with RMI. And I want to remind everybody that at the end of the week, on Friday, we're going to have our field trip day, and that's when we're going to encourage everybody to do yoga, decompress, go hiking, but most importantly, go to the Innovation Center in Basalt, which is a 15,000 square foot building that does not have a control room at 7,500 feet, or whatever it is. Right. Is that right? And that means no furnace for cooling or heating. 15,000 square, it's pretty incredible. You just can't think about that. What is that? So Martha Campbell and Doug Miller, thanks, Doug. I don't have my notes in front of me. Approached, let's just jump right into the beginning. Approached me when we were, we met serendipitously in California. We were showing Racing Extinction. I was involved in that movie, and they were very interested in the notion of engaging Hollywood to advance the exposure of the built environment in a new way, reaching new audiences through making it desirable, attractive, sexy. How do we engage popular culture and in the retrofit of the built environment to a net zero or even a carbon positive standard? And how do we do that at a value added proposition whereby it increases the value of the building, and especially in terms of a resale? Mm-hmm. Is that a pretty good synopsis, Doug and Martha?
Yeah.
So Doug, this is kind of coming out of, why don't you lead in with,
Sure.
with some of your latest and greatest?
Yeah, well, thanks, Chip. I just want to begin by reiterating how I think what we've heard and seen so far at this event is that a lot of the solutions we need today are already available, and they're increasingly affordable, or will soon be within shooting distance of being affordable. At the same time, I think we increasingly recognize at RMI that traditional approaches to engaging the public around sustainability aren't working that well, whether it's in terms of their voting patterns, in terms of just their everyday lives, and especially in terms of the biggest investments people make from their homes to their cars. And I think we're also recognizing that when we do engage the public, it needs to move beyond just dollar and cents arguments. The financial component is important, but it's not enough on its own to motivate people to act. And when we launched our new initiative called Residential Energy Plus within the Buildings Program, one thing we thought about was the disproportionate influence that media has on society, and a way to think about that is the media's brain print. The media industry can, of course, do things like reducing emissions from its buildings through efficiency, getting renewables off-site, by reducing emissions from the way different folks get around the world. But the way that media can most impact society is through its brain print, its influence on society. And I think traditionally, the media has recognized this. It's done things to inform the public, increase awareness that climate change is a priority, that we should do something by showing things around the world and the problems that are happening, and things that are happening in cities, as we've seen in some of the films already at this event. But I think one thing we increasingly realize is the importance of making sustainability, including things like energy efficiency retrofits to our homes, is the importance of making sustainability emotional, relatable, and social, going beyond just the financial motivations, but the other things that affect our motivations. And when you think about the emotional component, how do we create a campaign that inspires people to act? And when you're thinking about your homes, is it perhaps the comfort benefits, the health benefits, the peace of mind that you have because you can resell your home at a higher value or you have lower utility bills? In terms of making efficiency more relatable, how do we integrate sustainability into the storylines of sitcoms, film, et cetera. The fun example I always like to throw out is, what if in a popular sitcom, the fling that happens is between the main character and the solar guy, so that the next day you have in the salons people talking about that solar guy. So trying to make it just part of the vernacular. It's not something that just a few people are doing or is exclusive. It's the characters you identify with. Or thinking about Modern Family. What if the Dumfies are doing some silly thing to improve their home, and Luke, the son, starts spraying spray foam everywhere, and just makes people laughing about insulation in that case. And the third piece, how do we make this more social? Think about how right now we're seeing solar panels emerge in clusters in neighborhoods around the country. You have neighborhoods that have either no solar panels or a ton. There's sort of that neighbor-to-neighbor effect. How do we do something like that with efficiency, whether it's through maybe having home tours where thousands of people walk through homes in a given city to look at the energy upgrades that were done as part of other improvements that were made? Yeah, so I think that's the way we're thinking about it.
So Martha, and thanks, Doug. That's a great overview. Can you just quickly jump in and give us the female perspective on this? How does the solar guy, become
So
or the solar panel? Let's use that as a metaphor.
So you want my opinion on if that's going to fly? So the idea came from when we were talking about Desperate Housewives, and I think it's Joe Delfino, who's a plumber in the show. So he's Joe the plumber, and we thought, why does it need to be Joe the plumber? And everybody talks about the American constituent being Joe the plumber. We've got to be able to relate to Joe the plumber, and it's like, well, let's make that Joe the solar guy or Joe the efficiency installer. So that was kind of where that idea originated from. But kind of what Doug was mentioning is that when you start talking about solar and efficiency, people tend to find that maybe a little bit technical, or their eyes glaze over. It's just not really sexy. It's not really appealing. And so we've been trying to step in and increase consumer demand for this. So we have kind of three main areas that we focus on in our initiative, which is called Residential Energy Plus. There's the first piece of that, which is developing a new normal, where this is something that people just expect out of their homes. The second piece is them understanding that they can actually capture whatever they invest in their home on the back end when they sell it. And that has been a big issue in the market to date, where people will make an investment in solar or blow insulation in their home, and they don't believe they can actually capture that value at the time of sale. So we're working on that. And then the third piece is around making it easy to do this to your house. I mean, that's probably one of the largest barriers as well. I mean, there are so many steps in the process when you're thinking about retrofitting your home. You've got to get an audit. What does that mean in terms of what do I do to the building? Great, the windows are leaky and my refrigerator uses a lot of power, but now what? And so that translation from an audit all the way to getting financing, getting bids from contractors, picking a contractor that is going to be able to provide a reliable service. That is a huge undertaking, not to mention just having people ripping up your house and doing something to it. And so a big focus of our work is, how do we make this a streamlined service like buying a cell phone? If you walked into Verizon and you had to pick the hardware that goes into your cell phone, and then you had to pick the tower that the signal was getting sent through, I mean, would you want to use a cell phone? Maybe not. The rate of adoption might have been much lower. So those are the kinds of business models that we're looking at, are streamlining that, including the financing, so that when we make the emotional appeal or we develop a new norm, that a customer doesn't feel frustrated when they're trying to go buy this service and it's too hard, it's too frustrating. So there's an organization in the Netherlands called Energy Sprong, which has developed net zero energy retrofits that can be industrially manufactured, and they can be installed within less than 10 days, and they are financed through the energy savings of the building with a 30-year performance guarantee. And in the United States, in North America actually, there have been a total of 31 net zero energy retrofits, 31. The majority of the built environment is going to have to be retrofit if we're going to keep, us below 2 degrees Celsius. So That's not going to work. 31 retrofits in North America. In the Netherlands, in the last 3 years, they've already done 6,000 retrofits, and they have over 100,000 contracts to do more. So we're trying to bring that model here and scale retrofits where it's just something that people know they can just consume like any other product or service.
And just adding to that, I think one thing that, in terms of the role of media within this conversation, especially in terms of how do we get homeowners to even know that these better solutions are becoming available, one thing we emphasize is the notion of triggers. What are those key points when somebody owns a home where they're already doing a project? Let's add a little bit of energy and efficiency in that project. Or you're buying or selling a home. Let's build into that component of the process. So in terms of messaging for media, those are also key moments to influence the direction of homeowners in this case.
You know, I posit that we might want to have a discussion with Carla Walker-Miller and talk about how this could apply in Detroit. I mean, that'd be a great, ground zero, testing grounds for this very conversation. And that would also, of course, rope David Warren, because that's, as we know, only 80 miles away and in the Rust Belt.
Exactly.
And then we really need to be cognizant of that part of our country that created so much of the wealth during, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that we're now having to reinvent how we did it then into how we must do it now. But let's just jump right in, because we're running short on time. This is a short panel. To the notion that we have to figure out how are we going to popularize our own survival. How are we going to make it cool, hip, desirable, sexy? How do we create the next hula hoop of our own existence, or the Frisbee, and then apply that to the built environment? Because obviously that's the key. We all have to have homes, food, shelter, water. Yeah. And so, have you really looked at that in depth in terms of what's the game plan?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of the new normal initiative that's within Residential Energy Plus that Martha pointed out, one thing we're trying to facilitate in the market is, as I mentioned before, how do we make this more emotional? And so we're trying to create a national engagement campaign, something that's thinking about other campaigns of the past, like Smokey Bear, or Don't Mess with Texas, or Friends Don't Let Friends Drive Drunk, et cetera. How do we create this notion that wasting energy in your home is something that's unacceptable? And so we're trying to develop this in the market, and it's something that we're hoping will happen. So I think that's one component. Another is the sort of point about how do we make this more social? How do we help people demonstrate when they do these things in their home? So I think about the example of the iPod when it first got started, 10 or 15 years ago. One might argue that it became so popular because other people would see how many people started buying it because of the white earbuds. It was something that stood out in contrast to other things that were out there. And people could tell if you didn't have the iPod because you didn't have the little cool white earbuds. So how do we I would say this is something that we might want to float with the audience, and I think it would be fun to discuss even over lunch, because we haven't tackled this yet, but how do we make efficiency visible?
So you're talking about the cool factor.
Yeah.
Well, what about that, Martha?
What about the cool factor? I mean, I think that's where we really need to find partners that know how to translate things that aren't sexy into something that is, and that is why we have been trying to engage with the media. And there are some great examples of production companies out there doing this kind of work. One of them is Vulcan, which you've been working with for Racing Extinction, who also has kind of a public engagement campaign that takes all this inspiration and then translates that into action after seeing the film. But another organization that's has been thinking about this a lot is Participant Media. And the way they have done some of their campaigns, for example, the Violence Against Women Act was up for reconsideration in US Congress, and they launched the film North Country at the same time. And there they did a lot of studies after it, and were able to conclude that that media really shaped public opinion and the public agenda, and made it a really easy vote for the legislature to say, yes, we're gonna keep this act alive. So that's kind of, it's got to be nested within like a larger strategic initiative. It's not just about getting people excited and thinking something sexy, because the public is fickle. what they like, changes every single day. And to maintain relevancy, you have to be able to adapt your message really quickly and not get too attached with a specific outcome and move with the market. So sexy will evolve, but these markers that Doug is talking about that are symbols of like, I have what everybody else has. I have Hunter boots. I have Warby Parker glasses. There's markers there that you all don't realize. You are reacting to that, and you are going and buying those things because you see each other wearing them. So that's what we've got to do.
And I think just one concluding thought of the theme of this event, which is from Paris to the polls. One thing that behavioral research shows is that so often we focus on increasing awareness, thinking that that'll lead to new action, but the research actually shows that we need to change actions first to change beliefs. So by getting people to invest in these things in their homes, that might translate more into new voting habits, getting new politicians in office and things like that. So.
Well, just to sum it all up, I think that to the the basis of our organization, AREI, which is from competition to collaboration, and if we start to look at it into a collaborative construct, cooperative construct that then has social media implications, such that where now we begin to popularize this conversation, these types of conversations on Facebook, in Twitter, et cetera, that's going to perhaps lead to the cool factor. I want to thank my esteemed colleagues. Our time is over, and let's reconvene down at the Innovation Center on Friday for everybody. We're showing a great movie, Time to Choose. I hope you all join us at 3 o'clock.